What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Goal Line Dynasty. Today, Tyler and I are looking at about 6 players that we think could really overachieve in the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we get into the video, Tyler, how we doing, buddy?
I'm great, man. It's good to talk about these guys. These guys are definitely, I think, going to be difference makers on your rosters. These are guys you should be going out to look to add right now while the prices are cheap before the production starts showing up during the season. So I think there's a handful of guys that are supremely undervalued as far as keep trade cut goes, and the community is valuing them. So I'm going to be happy to point them out and hopefully help some of our viewers out here.
Absolutely. So I'll get into my first one here. And I've got T. Higgins. So it's really no secret. Anyone who knows me knows that T. Higgins is one of my favorite wide receivers, not just for fantasy football, but in real life as well. He's so much fun to watch. But T. Higgins is being wildly slept on, in my opinion. And I know he's being drafted usually somewhere between like the 9th and the 13th or 14th receiver off the board. But I really think his startup value is a lot higher than his real life trade value, if that makes sense. And I think whether you're playing Dynasty or redraft or best ball, I think he's going far too late in just about every single draft scenario right now. So my main thing with T. Higgins is, one, he's supremely talented, but 2, he gets a lot of hate. Right? People look at T. Higgins, they say he's not worth his ADP. He's only a 14.5 to 15 point per game player, which, by the way, is not bad. We're spoiled with elite play, but T. Higgins is kind of a hidden gem, in my opinion. So last year, if we look at his points per game total, it was 14.9. Not amazing, not the worst, but he had 3 games where he either got hurt or suited up but didn't play. So he has 3 games where he had a 26% snap share or less. If you take those 3 games away from his, repertoire in 2022, he had almost 18 points per game. It was 17.9, which would have made him firmly, a top 6, top 7 wide receiver over the course of a full season. Now, I know T. Higgins' knock is that we haven't seen him play a fully healthy season yet, but he really doesn't miss that much time. He misses a game or 2 here and there. The Bengals were kind of bullshitting us last year. Tyler, I don't know if you remember, but the Zach Taylor, he suited T. Higgins up and was like, oh yeah, he's going to play. And then he takes 1 snap and then we don't see him again for the rest of the day. And that happened twice last season. So I think that kind of gives T. Higgins a bad rep going into 2023, but you put into the consideration that he's talented. He's got Joe Burrow throwing to him. Obviously Joe Burrow's dealing with injury, but he should be good by week 1. And then you factor in, he's opposite of Jamar Chase. T. Higgins is never going to get double covered. He's rarely going to have the top, corner on him. And T. Higgins is their red zone target, and he's pretty damn good at it. So I think T. Higgins is going to be a massive overachiever for 2023. And he's a guy that no matter what format I'm in, I want on my team for this season.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who will just say, forget the games. I'm looking at the point per game numbers, and I think they're just ridiculous. I heard somebody say it the other day, don't come at me with he didn't play for those 3 games, you can't count them. Absolutely you have to count them. When he's on the field, that's what he's doing. He's putting up 18 points per game. I think he's highly slept on. I just did a startup the other day where he fell a round and a half past Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all of those guys. So I definitely think he's undervalued in terms of startup value, and he might be even a guy you could buy low on if people are just looking at the raw numbers from last year. If they're just clicking on the history on Sleeper and they're seeing that he finished as whatever the wide receiver 23 or whatever 19 or whatever it was last year. I don't have it in front of me, but I know if you look at those game logs, you're going to look in the deeper numbers and see he just produced every time he played, and he's definitely worth holding on your roster. And if you're going to sell him, waiting until people are seeing that production from him again. So my first guy here is going to be Chris Godwin. He's ranked as the wide receiver 33 on Keep Trade Cut. I think that's just absolutely absurd. I know you love Chris Godwin. I know he's not in the greatest situation this year, being with Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, whoever ends up winning the starting job there. But either way, if it's a dump off system, that's going to favor Chris Godwin. That's what he does. He's I don't want to say gadget guy, because he's a lot better than that. He's a great wide receiver, 1 in an offense. But he is the guy who can take those short slant routes, those screen passes, all those little short dump off plays that a poor quarterback or young quarterback may try to take advantage of. I think that he is still going to get that volume. He's still going to get the 120 plus targets that he's seen the past 2 years and be like firmly a top 20, top 15 wide receiver. I think that if he plays a full healthy season, like people are going to see again, Chris Godwin is still talented. He's still one of the best guys in the league. Keep trade cuts as you can get him for like a late first for Michael Pittman. I like Godwin's situation better than Pittman's right now. You could get him for Damian Pierce, for George Kittle, for Jameson Williams. I think any of those things I'd be glad to send for Chris Godwin to add him on my team, especially if I'm struggling to find a wide receiver too, and people aren't going to let me get the guys like T. Higgins, maybe a Jalen Waddle or something like that, one of those really like big name studs to add to my roster. I'm more than fine with sending like what I'm projecting to be a late first for Chris Godwin to go add some production to my rosters.
Yeah, and I love where you can get Chris Godwin in startups and in the trade market right now. I mean, to your point on Keep Trade Cut, he's the wide receiver 33 overall. He hasn't been worse than the wide receiver 33 overall since he was a rookie back in 2017. And the only other time since 2019 that he's finished even outside of the top 19 in PPR is when he went down with injury and only played 12 games. Mind you, all of that, Chris Godwin comes back in 2022. Yes, having Tom Brady is much better than having Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, but he was coming off of an ACL. Wide receivers or just players in general do not bounce back from an ACL and look normal in year one, but Chris Godwin did. I mean, he had 140 targets, over 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards, only found the end zone 3 times last year, not the best, but to come off of an ACL and go for 100 yards or 100 receptions for over 1,000 yards on the season, that's impressive. He's going to build off of that. And I love calling Chris Godwin a guy to overachieve in 2023 because I don't think, unless he gets hurt, there's really no way that he can't outplay the expectations that people have put on him. So I really, really like that call.
Yeah, I just got him in the mid 7th round, and I've been trading my shares of, if I'm sending Chris Olave, I'll take Chris Godwin and like a mid projected first if I can swing that into super flex league. If it's a 1 QB, I'm gonna really want it to be like an earlier first if I'm gonna want to like move down that far. But like those Chris Olave, T. Higgins, like that tier. We've talked about this like time and time again. I'm good with tearing down to like the Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, Chris Godwin, Hollywood Brown plus a first to give those guys up, especially if like it's an iffy team with some question marks that like if just 1 or 2 things go wrong, like all of a sudden I'm looking at a top 5 pick. I think you can totally smash that trade and be totally comfortable with it. Not really lose much production this year either. Maybe like 2 or 3 points a game going down from those tiers. And I think like going down to those guys who are undervalued is definitely going to help.
Yep. Absolutely love the call. I'm going to move into my second guy here, and Najee Harris, right? We've talked about Najee Harris occasionally on this channel. We're big fans of, we say someone's got to be this year's Josh Jacobs. And for us, it's always, is it going to be Najee or is it going to be Miles Sanders? And I feel like it's been a little while since we've pointed out some good things about Najee Harris, but make no mistake, we still love Najee. Tyler, I'm speaking for you. I'm going to assume that you still like Najee just based off of recent conversations we've had. And I mean, how could you not, right? So in Dynasty startups right now, so he is not worth, apparently he's not worth much more than, Terry McLaurin, right? Or even Chris Godwin, right? Those wide receiver 28 to 33, 34 range, Najee is not worth much more than that in the trade market, which is a mistake. But looking at Keep Trade Cut, in terms of overall assets in a super flex league, Najee Harris is the 61st ranked asset according to the Dynasty community, which is dumb. It's really dumb. He's 25 years old, right? He's only been in the league for a few years. He's 25 years old. We still have a lot of football left out of Najee Harris. The main thing with him, the reason why people are fading him is he was abysmal at the start of 2022, right? Like weeks 1 through week 10, he was RB 40 something or like late 30s. He really wasn't anything amazing. His points per game was shit. Jalen Warren was playing into it. But, you got to look that a lot of things were working against Najee. One, Mitch Trubisky and rookie quarterback Kenny Pickett were battling over the first half of the season, right? There was a lot of question marks in this Pittsburgh offense that really shouldn't be there going into 2023. Now, the other big thing, arguably the biggest thing with Najee, is that he had that Liz Frank injury last year that was so insanely downplayed. Like, we didn't even know about it until after people were drafting Najee Harris in the second round of their redraft leagues. Like, that's how crazy it was. It just kind of came out of nowhere, but apparently it was there all off season. He played the first half of the season with a plate in his foot and didn't get it taken out until like week 6 or week 7. Fast forward from week 11 to week 18, right? I've said this before about Najee. Tale of two seasons. From week 11 to week 18, there were only 4 running backs that scored more fantasy points than him. He was the RB5 overall in PPR leagues from week 11 to week 18, which was perfect timing for anyone who actually made the playoffs with him, right? So I think the beginning of last season was an outlier for Najee. I mean, we go back 2 years ago, Najee was a complete stud. He was a dynasty darling. Everybody wanted him on their team. If we take his good half of the season last year, RB5, he still fits the mold. So I think that he is one of the best discount RB1s that you could possibly get right now. Again, he's only 25 years old. According to the consensus, he's only the RB14, right? You have a guy that's priced out of the RB1 range, but could very easily finish in the top 5 or top 6. So I think Najee's going to crush it in 2023. We're going to see a lot more second half Najee than we did first half from 2022. So sign me up. I think he's going to smash whatever league you draft him in this year.
Yeah, and Najee is in one of those like very few situations where like his team wants him to really be like the focal point of the offense and like be a bell cow. They want to give him a ton of touches and they want to like focus the offense around him. So I definitely love Najee as the Josh Jacobs of this year that we've kind of been calling since, I don't know, probably like as soon as the season ended last year. I think he was our candidate when we started doing these mock drafts and stuff. But yeah, I think he's definitely supremely undervalued. He has the age like cushion where he's not retiring like next year. We know that he's probably going to still be a serviceable running back in the league. He's a big boy with not a lot of competition. Some people will say Jalen Warren's the better running back in the offense. I think it's a joke. We have the anecdotal evidence that he had that plate removed and all of a sudden, he was back to the old Najee again. I mean, there was a time after his rookie season where he was like the RB2 or 3 by like default, because it was like, well, he just did all that and he's still young, so he has to be like this high up. He disappointed a little bit coming off an injury, and now all of a sudden he gets bumped down to a very cheap price tag. I was able to trade, like in a 1 quarterback league, I was able to trade Jahmyr Gibbs for Najee and a first from a team who just finished like 3rd to last. So it's like, I'll take that all day long. I still believe in Najee, and I still believe in like the workload that he's going to see over the next handful of years. So I definitely like to call on him. My next guy is also going to be a running back. He's ranked as the RB31 right now in Keep Trade Cut. David Montgomery. And it's funny that I just bring up Jahmyr Gibbs because obviously it's his running mate. I think that David Montgomery is going to see a lot of playing time this year. I mean, we saw what happened last year with Jamal Williams and how he saw all the goal line touches. I mean, David Montgomery is a much better back than Jamal Williams. So I think he's probably going to take a little bit more of a workload than that. I think Jahmyr Gibbs also is very undersized and is probably going to be more utilized as like a scat back. Is he going to be a big play guy? Yes. Is he going to be a big part of that offense? Yes. But David Montgomery is going to take a bulk of the like dusty carries that are between the tackles and like near the goal line and things like that. This is nothing against Jahmyr Gibbs. This is just saying like David Montgomery is probably going to rush for over 800 yards this year, and it's not going to he's going to have a handful of touchdowns too. He's probably going to have more touchdowns than Jahmyr Gibbs as well, at least on the ground, So my guy is going to be David Montgomery, ranked as the RB31. He's never finished lower than like the RB24 in his entire career. I think he's still going to get a very good workload there. I think he's going to see the probably close like 175 to 200 touches that he saw last year. I mean, I don't think it's going to go down too much. I think it's going to be more of a 1A, 1B type thing than Jahmyr Gibbs just leading the way all the time. I mean, if you spent the first round pick on your running back, knowing that he's undersized, are you just going to give him those touches between the tackles and run him down into the dirt so you can't even finish his rookie contract productively? I don't think so. I think David Montgomery is going to be very serviceable. Do I think he's going to be a 17-point per game running back? No. I think he's going to be a 10 to 12 point per game running back that maybe catches a ball or two out of the backfield and sees a touchdown every other game or so, something like that. So I definitely like David Montgomery's price tag. You could get him for like mid-second, Elijah Moore, Mike Williams, Michael Mayer. If you're desperate for a running back, I definitely like those trades as well. So I definitely like going on David Montgomery to exceed the expectations because Jahmyr Gibbs has gotten a lot of the hype.
Yeah, I like Monty a lot, and to your point, he's not going to be this world breaking running back. Like we're not gonna see a Jamal Williams situation probably ever again, or at least not anytime soon, where you just randomly put together 15, 16 touchdowns, whatever Jamal Williams had. It was ridiculous, right? That's not going to happen again. But Monty, I like your call. No one's going to be surprised if he skates away with 800 yards. I would be more surprised if he had under 700 yards than anything. That would be very surprising to me. So even if you gave him a minimalist projection of 700 yards, you can still guess that he will lead that running back room in ground touchdowns. And given how many rushing touchdowns the Lions had last year, I think it's reasonable to assume that Monty could find the end zone, 6, 7, maybe even 8 times. He could hit a career high. His career high in rushing touchdowns was only 8, and Jamal Williams doubled that last year, right? So I think comparing him to Jamal Williams in the touchdown situation, it might be a little unfair, but it's very warranted because he is the bigger bruiser back in this offense. We know that that's what Dan Campbell likes. So I really like, toting Monty as one of those guys that can really exceed expectations in 2023. But my final guy here, I accidentally brought him up when I was talking about Najee Harris, because I meant to say Chris Godwin, and then I'm looking at my sheet here. Terry McLaurin came out, right? So there was a little spoiler alert for you guys, but Terry McLaurin is going to be my third and final guy here that I think is going to overachieve. Last year, he was the PPR wide receiver. I think it was 14 overall. That was his best finish, right? Now, that finish was comparable to his finish of just 2 years ago. I think there was a whole difference of like 5 or 6 PPR points. But either way, he's very consistent. He's never hurt. I'm going to knock on wood right now because I don't want to jinx that. But Terry McLaurin is always available. He's always reliable. The thing with Terry too, he's not going to have an insane amount of boom weeks, right? Like his 25 plus point weeks are few and far in between, but you're never really going to get burnt by Terry. Like he is just about as solid of, a low end wide receiver 2 or high end wide receiver 3 as you can possibly want. But the cool thing with Terry is how cheap he is right now. Wide receiver 29 overall on Keep Trade Cut. He's not even 28 years old yet. We're drafting him like he's 33 and he's about to fall off. I know we haven't seen the ceiling that we've wanted to with Terry. We've touted him, not us specifically, but like so many people have touted Terry as a potential, top 10, top 15 wide receiver. And in his defense, he did finish top 15 last year, but there's always something left to be desired from Terry, right? And I don't know if 2023 is the year that we finally see him become a top 10 wide receiver, but I would say it's as good of a year as any. I have a lot of belief in Sam Howell. I think he's better than Taylor Heineke and, Carson Wentz and all these other guys that Terry has played with over the last few years. I think Sam Howell is going to lean on Terry and Jahan Dotson, but I think Terry is going to be a massive beneficiary from playing with a quarterback that's not afraid to make the big throw. And Terry is the guy that they're going to rely on to make the big play time after time. You also put into account Terry McLaurin, last 3 seasons, 120 plus targets minimum. I don't think that's going to change. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him have over 130 or 135 this year playing with Sam Howell, right? So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, but the price is right on Terry. You're paying, wide receiver 3 prices for a guy who could legitimately finish as a wide receiver 1 on the season. I don't think it's possible that we see him hit, a top 5, top 6 ceiling or anything like that, but I'd be less surprised from like a top 6 finish out of Terry than I would be if he, finished outside of like top 20 or something, right? Like I would be very surprised if he's not at least a top 20 wide receiver in 2023. And you can you're paying significantly less than wide receiver 20 prices there, right? So Terry, 2023, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and everybody kind of knows how talented Terry McLaurin is, right? But it's like he plays for Washington, so he's just never had that elite quarterback play that's like slingshotted him to the top and really made him like a true difference maker. And there was a long time where I was out on Terry McLaurin because a lot of people thought he was going to be that like a perennial top 8 guy. But at this point, like his price tag, I'm more than fine with it. There's almost nobody as reliable as Terry McLaurin, so I'm definitely going to take that shot on him being whatever he's what do you say, ranked wide receiver 30 something.
Yeah, he's wide receiver 29 on
29. Yeah,
right now. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I know I'm going to get top 24 production out of a guy for another 2 or 3 years, then he's higher than the wide receiver 29 in my book. So definitely like him to beat expectations, and I like that call out by you. Here, this guy is ranked as the wide receiver 59 on Cube Trade Cut. So you would think we're like scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but it's a guy who everybody knows and nobody really loves in JuJu Smith-Schuster. I've kind of clamored for him this time last year. I thought he was going to obviously have a much better year with the Chiefs than he did. Injuries kind of got in the way of that. And, as soon as he started to get rolling, it was a confusing season for JuJu. But people are like going around saying that, if he couldn't do it with Patrick Mahomes, then he's not going to be able to do it with anybody. I don't think that's necessarily true because I don't think Pat Mahomes really caters to JuJu's skill set, if that makes any sense. I think that if anything, Mac Jones really is going to be the guy who mimics Ben Roethlisberger the best. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I think that this is the most similar situation that he's been in since his rookie year, is second year in the season when he was actually performing really well and when he had a lot of dynasty value. I think this is the most similar offense that he's going to see, the most amount of touches or targets rather he's going to see. He's the true number one this year. It's not Travis Kelce anymore. He is the true number one in New England. They did not go out and get DeAndre Hopkins, so there's nobody else ahead of him. He's the most talented receiver in the offense. He should get peppered with 100 plus, 120 plus targets this year. It's really just him and Ramondre that they have to work around. So I'm going to take my bet on JuJu Smith-Schuster finishing higher than the wide receiver 59 this year. And he's only 26, 27 years old too. So if he stays in this situation for the next couple of years, kind of like I was saying last year when he was with the Chiefs, if he stays there for the next couple of years, it could be great. If he stays here for the next couple of years, it could still be great. He's got a little bit of a shelf life left. He's not old and dusty. He's still got a chance to produce and put up top 24 numbers, and I would be really, really shocked if he didn't this year if he was healthy. So if I can get a top 30 wide receiver even for the next 3 or 4 years out of JuJu Smith-Schuster with Mac Jones, then even if it's low upside, I'm going to take the volume that he's going to get all day long at that price tag.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that JuJu, at the very least, absorbs the Jacoby Myers role, right, in New England. And the last 2 seasons, Jacoby Myers was PPR wide receiver 28, PPR wide receiver 30. Now, obviously, Jacoby and JuJu slightly different players there, but at the end of the day, if that's what JuJu's walking into, he's walking into a place where, over the last 2 years, Jacoby combined for 210 targets over those 2 seasons, right? So there's a lot of work to go around for JuJu. Plus, you take into account that New England no longer has Matt Patricia calling plays this year, and that could actually mean a pretty good boost for this offense, right? I don't necessarily – I'm not a massive believer in Mac Jones, but I don't disbelieve in him enough to say that 2022 was what you could expect out of him from 2023. I think we're going to see more of what we saw out of rookie Mac Jones than we saw out of last year of Mac Jones. And that's going to pay big dividends for JuJu. The only thing that I'm worried about in this offense is that they brought in Mike Gesicki. So between him and Hunter Henry, they're probably taking up most of the touchdowns, or at least most of the red zone looks. But we've seen it out of JuJu before. We don't need a ton of touchdowns for him to be relevant. If he's going to be the guy that's peppered with targets, he's going to be a PPR darling. And to your point, there's almost no way that he doesn't finish better than wide receiver 59, right? Even if he's wide receiver 36 on the season, I think that would even be a little underachieving for what I personally have in store for JuJu this year. But even if he finishes as wide receiver 36, that's 23 spots above where you're paying for him on the wide receiver market. So absolutely love calling out JuJu there. Yeah, so that's going to do it for us here on Goal Line Dynasty today. Let us know in the comments, who is a player that you really think is going to just shut up all of the doubters in 2023 and could really outplay, whether it's their ADP, whether it's their dynasty value, or just a sleeper that you think nobody is talking about enough, that you think is just really going to, knock it out of the park in 2023. But before we officially wrap up this video, Tyler, any closing remarks?
Yeah, just remember this video when you win your fantasy championships this year.
Exactly. When you win that trophy, make sure you send us pictures. And if this advice didn't help you, well, you didn't hear it from us. That was the other guys. But for myself, for Tyler, for Goal Line Dynasty, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, hit that like, hit us in the comments, and we will see you next time.